Guys, this is Baijam here, and this is my video on Kelvin cycle, which is basically the continuation of the old video that was light dependent and light independent reactions. So Kelvin cycle is also called as the light independent reaction. I mean, the main reaction of the light independent reaction is the Kelvin cycle. So let's get into what Kelvin cycle basically like introduces us to. Now, always remember that there are three stages of Kelvin cycle. One is carbon fixation. I mean, I'm gonna prove them to you all. Like, I'm gonna show you that how are they the three stages, but just know right now that there are three stages of Kelvin cycle. And one is carbon fixation, other one is reduction, and the last one is regeneration of RUBP, which is ribulose bisphosphate. Don't worry, it's not hard. I'm gonna make it really easy. I mean, it's a pretty easy topic. And this video is also going to be a short one because this is the continuation of the old video and this is only on Kelvin cycle. So yeah, remember that the products of light dependent reaction which we learned in the last video are ATP and NADPH. These ATP and NADPH are now used in this Kelvin cycle. So this is basically, I mean, the products of the light dependent reaction are the reactants in the light independent reaction. So yeah, remember that the product of the Kelvin cycle, which we're going to learn right now, is always the product of photosynthesis. I mean, the when the product of Kelvin cycle is formed, it is converted into whatever type of carbohydrate you needed to make it to. I mean, for example, if you needed glucose, then the product of the Kelvin cycle, which is always G3P, which is always TP, triose phosphate, is going to be converted into glucose. If you need some other carbohydrate, then it's going to be converted into the respective carbohydrate you need. But always know that the end product of the Kelvin cycle, which is triose phosphate, is converted into whatever type of carbohydrate do you need for the final. I mean, the plant needs for the final product. Okay, so yeah. Now this here is the Kelvin cycle. I mean, it looks pretty complicated, but trust me, it's a really easy topic. It's a really conceptual topic. So the number one step, what happens here is this. You guys can see that three carbon dioxide, these red color two oxygens and one gray color carbon represents a carbon dioxide. What happens is this three carbon dioxides, they react with RUBP. You guys can see here, RUBP, which is ribulose bisphosphate. Always remember that you do not need to learn the full form of it, but I mean it's helpful to learn the full form of it. And yeah, so ribulose bisphosphate is a 5 carbon compound, and when carbon dioxide joins with it, it forms a 6 carbon compound. Now this 6 carbon compound is a really unstable compound. Now you guys can see that these three carbon dioxide, they join with three ribulose bisphosphate, right? So carbon dioxide has 1 carbon, RUBP has 5 carbons, they join together to form 6 carbons. And this reaction, it takes place in the presence of an enzyme that is called Rubisco. You do not need to learn the full form, but just know that it's called Rubisco. So this enzyme, I mean, the questions are really frequently asked about this enzyme. You will go anywhere about photosynthesis, there's always going to be a question of Rubisco. So just remember that this process is called carbon dioxide fixation, carbon fixation, sorry. This process is called carbon fixation, and this process takes place in the presence of Rubisco. So yeah, now what happens here when carbon dioxide combines with RUBP? A 6 carbon compound is formed, and this compound is really unstable, so it breaks down immediately into 3 carbon into a 3 carbon compound. I mean, yeah, 3 carbon compound and 6 molecules of a 3 carbon compound are formed. I mean, look here, 6 carbon six carbon compounds, but three molecules. So they break down to form six molecules of three carbon compound. Makes sense, right? I mean, before there were six carbons in each molecule. Now these six carbons are breaking down into three, so there will be three. So there will be six molecules of three carbon compounds now, right? So when uh, this happens here, and what forms here is PGA. Now PGA is the three carbon compound, like which is six times because three carbon compounds are formed here. Now when PGA is broken down into, I mean when this unstable compound is broken down into PGA, the next step that happens is reduction. Reduction here happens when this PGA converts into this G3P here. G3P stands for glycerate 3 phosphate. Yeah. G3P, when PGA is broken down into G3P, 6 NADPH and 6 ATP are broken down. Now, remember that these are the products of the light dependent reaction. So what is happening here is when ATP is broken down into ADP, six phosphate groups are released. These six phosphate groups are combined with the PGA to form six molecules of G3P. Okay, always remember that six molecules of these phosphate groups are joined together with a molecule of PGA to form G3P. Okay? And what happens here when NADPH broken down to NADP? Hydrogen is released. Always remember that six hydrogens are released because six molecules of NADPH are broken down to NADP, right? So not sorry, broken down, we shouldn't say broken down, we should say, I should say oxidized because the hydrogen is lost. And here G3P is oxidized. So what do we, sorry, it is reduced because it gains hydrogen. When these hydrogen from NADPH are broken down, again broken down, I mean when these hydrogens for NADPH are removed, these six molecules of G3P, they gain these hydrogen and therefore they're reduced themselves. Okay? Now, yeah. So after these six molecules of glycerate 3-phosphate are produced, one molecule of glycerate 3-phosphate always leaves the reaction. This one molecule of glycerate 3-phosphate is always the product of the Kelvin cycle. So what we get is basically glycerate 3-phosphate, right? Glycerate 3-phosphate is the main product of Kelvin cycle. Now, always remember that six molecules of glycerate 3-phosphate, there are six molecules of glycerate 3-phosphate and one is always the output. The other five are then used to regenerate RUBP. Now this process here, the fourth one, you guys can see that carbon exits the cycle in one molecule with G3P. Plant cells use the G3P to make glucose and other organic compounds. This G3P makes a half molecule of glucose. So if you want to make a full molecule of glucose, you need 2G3P, right? Am I right? So here what happens is that's why you guys can see three carbon dioxide are joined together, right? In the first step. So here, if you want two molecules of G3P, you need to add six molecules of carbon dioxide. Am I right? So yeah, six molecules of carbon dioxide are formed here, are used to form two complete molecule of glucose. Now back to the step 4. You guys can see here that G3P is released and therefore 5 G3P are left here because there were 6 total. So when 5 G3P are left here, this process then continues as the regeneration of RUBP, which remember that RUBP is the reactant of this reaction here because it takes part in the first step of the reaction. Now RUBP is regenerated by G3P, and how is it done? It's always done by 3 molecules of ATP. Remember that to convert G3P into RUBP, always remember that 3 molecules of ATP are required. 5 glycerate 3 phosphate molecules to 3 molecules of ribulose bisphosphate. Always 3 ATP are required. 3 ATP are required because 3 molecules of what do you call phosphate groups join together with the G3P to form RUBP, right? So yeah. Now remember that this G3P after it's broken, after it's lost, one G3P is lost as an output. So these 5 molecules of G3P in our books and in our exams, they are called triose phosphate. They name them TP. So this G3P is before the losing of one molecule of G3 and glycerate 3 phosphate, right? And after when we lose the molecule of G3P, after the product is formed, when 5 molecules of G3P are formed, we call it triose phosphate. So yeah, just know that this is always called triose phosphate after the losing of one molecule of G3P. And so you guys can count here that first step was called carbon fixation, where 3 molecules of carbon dioxide join together with 3 molecules of ribulose bisphosphate to form a 6 carbon compound, because of course 1 carbon and ribulose is 5 carbon compound, so they join together to form a 6 carbon compound, which is really unstable in the presence of an enzyme called Rubisco. Now this unstable 6 carbon compound, it breaks down into uh, 6 molecules of 3 PGA. When this happens, 6 ATPs and 6 NADPH are 6 NADPH are reduced to NADP and oxidized to NADP, and 6 ATP are broken down to ADP to release the phosphate groups, which are used by the PGA molecules to form G3P. When glycerate 3-phosphate G3P is formed, it is reduced, and NADP becomes a carrier again, and it is removed from the reaction. So when this happens, the one molecule of glycerate 3-phosphate is lost, and the same compound is of now the same compound is called triose phosphate. Now we have 5 molecules of triose phosphate here. This one, remember that this is called triose phosphate. So we can say 5 molecules of triose phosphate. Okay. Now 5 molecules of triose phosphate are formed here, and this process is gonna be called regeneration of RUBP, right? This process here. This is called regeneration of RUBP. This process here is called reduction. Wait. This process here is called reduction. This is called regeneration of RUBP, and this process here is called carbon fixation, right? Carbon fixation, reduction, and regeneration. Okay. Now we gotta see that what are the total results of this. Now results of this are that 6 molecules of ATP used here and 3 molecules of ATP used here. So in total 9 molecules of ATP are used. 9 ATP, right? These 9 ATPs are used here and 6 molecules of NADPH are used here. Sorry. 6 molecules of NADPH. So in total, remember that 9 ATP and 6 molecules of NADPH are used here. This is really important. They mostly ask these in tables. So yeah. 3 molecules of carbon dioxide are also used. Okay? So yeah. Now what the figure that they give us in exams is kind of like this. Now this is the figure that they give us in exams. Now this is the simple one, and that was what happens behind the scenes. This is what happens, which is in our course and which we have to learn in the exam thing, right? So what is happening? This is the same process, it's just the easier form of it. Now see, carbon dioxide here combines with this Rubisco. When carbon dioxide combines with this ribulose bisphosphate in the presence of enzyme Rubisco to form unstable intermediate, this one. And this is a 6 carbon compound and it's really unstable. And so it breaks down immediately into, this glycerate 3 phosphate. When it breaks down into 2 molecules of glycerate 3 phosphate, what happens is that 2 molecules of NADPH. Now remember here, this is a single, this is for a single cycle, right? That the one we learned before was for 6 cycle. When it happens 6 times. This is for a single cycle here. So in one, look here. Yeah. So what we learned the last diagram that we learned was happening 6 times. So therefore here we could have seen that 6 molecules of NADPH were used and 6 molecules of ATP were used. Here this is happening one time, so therefore 2 molecules of NADPH are used, right? So yeah. Now you guys can see that two glycerate 3 phosphate are converted into 2 triose phosphate. When these two glycerol phosphate are converted into 2 triose phosphate, one of the triose phosphate is lost, which I told you guys that it's called triose phosphate now. So we have 2 molecules of triose phosphate, which one of them is lost and converted into any type of carbohydrate or lipids or amino acids you need to convert it into, right? So now what we have here is 5 out of 6. See, this is 6 times, so multiply by 6, so it will be 5. So 5 molecules of ribulose bisphosphate are formed here from 2 molecules of triose phosphate. And these triose phosphate are formed from 2 molecules of glycerate 3 phosphate. Remember, always. Okay? So, yep, this was it for today, and I hope you guys understood. And thank you so much. Bye bye.